You don't look at your watch again, that useless object tediously measuring time in accordance with human vanity. Those little hands marking out the long hours that were invented to disguise the real passage of time, which races with a mortal and insolent swiftness no clock could ever measure. A life, a century, 50 years, you can't imagine those lying measurements any longer. You can't hold that bodiless dust within your hands. Hey everybody, thank you for watching Leaf by Leaf as always. Today I'm happy to talk about a little treat from Carlos Fuentes called Aura. This came out in 1962. It is very small. You can see it's a slim volume. And on top of that, this is a bilingual edition that's put out by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. So it's about 140 pages. If you're reading it in only one of the two languages, Spanish or English, then it's really about 70 pages long. So it's more of a novella. But I want to say right here at the top, do not be deceived. And do not let this fall victim to the comparison game, such as comparing it to one of his other books. He has many. He has nonfiction and fiction. Fuentes was, of course, one of the main pillars of the Latin American boom. He is probably the most notable Mexican writer of all time. But don't let his monumental and, yes, magnum opus, Terra Nostra, overshadow this little treat. Because Aura is not something that he just tossed off to make some money or to get something out there in print. This is a very finely crafted and well executed novella. You may be hearing my voice come across a little differently than it normally does. That's because on my last day of vacation last week in Las Vegas, I caught a cold and so had to fly home with a cold, trying to mask it so that people didn't think I had COVID and somehow was infiltrating the plane. And so I'm trying to recover from that plus jet lag. So I apologize if my face and voice sound really tired and strange. I hope that in no way affects the love for this book and this review overall. Since it was such a short piece and I was reading it for the first time, what I decided before the trip was that I would read it on the plane ride there and then spend my week in other literature and, of course, just relaxing on vacation, enjoying dinners with my wife. And then I would reread this book on the flight back. And I did just that, and it was wonderfully rewarding. In fact, this little book, like so many others, will prove to you that slower, more attentive reading and rereading is so very rewarding. Because after the first time I read it, I thought that I had it all pegged down. But then when I read it the second time on the way back, there were so many new avenues that were opened up and so many little details that I didn't see before. Yes, because I didn't have context, but even the twist and some of the implications of the reveal were totally different to me on the second read. The story is about a young historian, Felipe Montero, who sees an advertisement in the newspaper asking for someone who knows colloquial French and is good with history and writing to come and offer their services for something like 9,000 or 4,000 pesos a month. A lot of money, enough to be appealing for Senor Montero. In any case, he says, this advertisement is basically written for me, so I'm going. And what happens when he goes to this address that's in this very curious section of town that he didn't think was even inhabited any longer, and he takes a look back at all the hustle and bustle of modernity, all of the traffic, and then he turns and enters into a dark Gothic courtyard. So right off the bat, it is as if he's literally stepping back in time. Of course, you'll note already that this is a Gothic tale. Yes, it's got magic realism applied to it everywhere you look. This term has been so overused and stretched and maligned that it really kind of has no meaning anymore. If someone has a dream in the book, it seems that magic realism gets applied to it. But in any case, it's a Gothic tale, and it's in the Fuentes style. Fuentes loved Balzac, and he loved Faulkner. And so you get a more well-rounded and well-grounded and thought-through Gothic tale than just the run-of-the-mill. Anyhow, all these strange events start happening. There is an old woman there, Signora Irrente, and she basically is asking Montero to go through her husband's memoirs and revise them, get in touch with his style, and fix things up, and then ultimately complete the memoirs. And that's a big key. Once he gets to the end of what is written in these old documents of her late husband's, she will then dictate the rest of it, and he is to write it down. But in any case, she's in a hurry, presumably because she's in the last leg of her life. She's in a hurry. She wants these memoirs finished. While he's there, he meets her young, strikingly gorgeous niece, Aura, who has these green eyes. And then, as most of these types of stories go, one strange thing after another starts to happen. He starts to notice little quirks, such as whenever the Signora is talking, the Signorita, her lips are moving inaudibly, but as if they're connected in some interesting way. Then we get some crazy, bizarre imagery that's just dropped in as if it's totally natural, which that's a major definition of magic realism. But one of them is a group of cats, and I'll just leave it at that. And it's a quick moment. That, coupled with this front cover, which on the first read didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, except for the green eyes, because Aura in the book has green eyes. This puts a little twist on some of the themes. So in the end, as you can imagine, yes, Aura and Senor Montero have a nocturnal rendezvous that then sets in motion this crazy sort of fever dream of transformations that leads ultimately to the very end and the twist. But with this book, the point is not the twist, but rather how Fuentes gets to the twist. Everything that he puts in place for you. So that's the main plot of the story. It's told entirely in the second person present point of view, which is always effective for making the reader feel like these events are happening to them and in the moment. Someone reached out to me and said that judging between the Spanish and this English translation, the English maintains the present tense, whereas the original Spanish modulates between past and present. At least for just reading the English, I can tell you that I quite enjoyed it, but I can see, because of what takes place, how that alternation lends another dimension to what's really going on behind the scenes. As we come to expect from literature coming out of Mexico, there's a very strong element of Catholicism wrapped up in Eros. One of the very first scenes that happens with Montero once he enters into this house that's seemingly back in time. You look in back of you and you're almost blinded by the gleam from the religious objects. The only light coming from inside these dark quarters is from this huge shrine of votives and all of this different religious paraphernalia. And then later on, the biblical themes, the Catholicism starts to show itself in these rites, such as the ritual foot washing that mirrors Christ washing the disciples' feet. You feel the warm water that bathes the soles of your feet while she washes them with a heavy cloth, now and then casting furtive glances at that Christ carved from black wood. Not too long after that moment, we get a very interesting communion rite that very explicitly intertwines Catholicism and Eros. And so at first, I was led to believe that the Signora was very fervently Catholic and pleading with God to bring back her youth. But then as Montero sees the way that she performs some of these incantations, and given the quick scene that he witnesses with the cats, it occurred to me that the black cat is, after all, a witch's familiar. And so it appears that the old woman has actually abandoned hope in having her wish, her vain wish, granted by the god of Catholicism, and has turned herself into a sort of bruja. She suddenly raises her fists and strikes feebly at the air, as if she were doing battle against the images you can make out as you tiptoe closer. Christ the Virgin, Saint Sebastian, Saint Lucia, the Archangel Michael, and the grinning demons in an old print, the only happy figures in that iconography of sorrow and wrath. What's really interesting in this story is the very deliberate and overt use of colors. Almost every color appears in here: purple, green, yellow, red, black, white. On my first read, I was starting to pick up on a predominance of green and red, which made me start to formulate a thesis in connection with the colors of Mexico's flag. But ultimately, this didn't pan out and was just too contrived, so I abandoned it. The most overt use of color is, of course, green. And as you can see, this cat's eyes are green. The green eyes of the señorita, the niece, Aura, captivates Senor Montero. Because Fuentes is a master writer, we get this little foreshadowing very early where Montero looks up and sees that there are greenish curtains that darken the long windows. And what is the symbol of a window? The eyes of the soul. And then when Aura shows up, of course, finally you can see that those eyes are sea green and that they surge, break to foam, grow calm again, then surge again like a wave. So this embodiment of Aura's soul is not a stable thing. It is a highly volatile thing. And in fact, we'll find that it's temporary. The other use of color that we see is in the ribbons that tie together the memoirs of Senora Errante's deceased husband. The first bundle is bound together with a yellow ribbon, the second bundle with a blue ribbon, the third bundle with a red ribbon. We never get another bundle after that one, but I would like to assert that I think that what we're witnessing in the tale is the writing of the fourth bundle, and it could only be tied with a ribbon of one color, and that is green. Why green? Because green represents youth, new life, spring, the greenery all around us as things start to grow back after the long winter of old age. Green is also fertility, bringing something into existence. As the tale starts to get very crazy and hit its apotheosis, we're given that ancient Greek thought of us all being doubles, being only one half of a whole, and then our life being about the search for that other half. But in Fuentes' conception of that, we get a little twist on it. You're seeking your other half, that the sterile conception last night engendered your own double. I'm going to try to tiptoe around this. If you haven't read it, go ahead and stop the video right here. There's a brilliant theme here that Fuentes is working with, which is, of course, the recovery of youth, the recovery of beauty. The Senora is in old age. She wants to bring back her younger self, but she also wants to bring back the husband of her youth. There's a kinship here with Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. What the Senora realizes is that she is able to bring her youthful self back in the personification of Aura, but only for a few days at a time. The big twist or reveal is that what's happening with Senor Montero is that he is being transformed into the author of the memoirs, the late husband of the Senora. But I think it may be a little more complex than that. I'm not certain that Senor Montero is being so much transformed as being called back into a repetition of his life. That is, he's not transforming because he already is the late senor who penned the memoirs. Senora Irrente has figured out how to bring them both back temporarily, her husband and herself. There is a fourth person that I totally discarded on my first read, and that is the servant, whom we never meet and never see. We're only told that he runs out to go to Felipe Montero's house to retrieve some items. Thus, there are two doubles in the house, their older selves and their younger selves, and they're all revolving around each other and the younger selves are only able to come back temporarily. That younger self is the you, the second person you that we're pulled into from the very beginning as Felipe Montero. So it makes us feel like this is a totally different person who isn't implicated in all of the brouhaha from the start. But in fact, I think that it already is that way. The more that I continue to think about this short masterpiece, even after my second time reading it, the more I'm ready to read it again and test out different avenues and theories that are budding in my mind. The writing is so controlled yet expressive. The story is tight yet boundless. What can I say? It's a mini masterpiece from Mexico.